It's a beautiful sunny day here in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and so here's a video on the update I've done to my NE0U EZ-L 160 meter antenna. What I've done is replace the wire that I use for the driven element, and you can see that there in the bottom center of your picture, and I'll explain why in this video. Alright, in this wider view you can see the NE0U antenna here, and it runs up to about here and then goes down, was going diagonally down to this tree somewhere in this area right here. Well, right in this area there were some twigs and some branches, and the driven element was actually making contact with those branches. Now, I have an Elecraft KPA 1500, so I'm capable of running some juice, full legal limit, on 160 meters. As that wire made contact with the branches, as I was transmitting with high power, I had a failure on the DX Engineering premium antenna wire I was using. We'll take a look at that now. As you can see, we've had failure with the antenna wire. It actually melted it. Here's a screenshot. One night I was chasing some DX on 160 meter CW when unexpectedly my SWR went up, which of course didn't make my amplifier real happy, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, NE0U knew what was going on. He said something happened to your driven element, and he was right. This is what can happen when 1500 watts of CW meets elements of a tree it doesn't like. It's a curious odor here with this burnt rubber. It actually smells like wood smoke, like you would use on a grill. Very curious. Right in Steve's article on the EZ-L, he suggested using test probe wire for the driven element. Well, I felt any antenna wire would work, especially DX Engineering premium antenna wire. However, I learned the hard way it didn't work, and you just saw the results. So what I replaced it with is this, General Cables part number C1321. And this is their rubber test lead, and I believe this is 18 gauge. And so that's what I replaced it with as per the recommendation in the NE0U article on the EZ-L antenna. There's two things you need to know about this particular wire. First of all, and there's no other way of putting this, it reeks. I mean, it stinks to high heaven. It has a very strong rubber odor to it. And your best bet is to keep it wrapped up in a container and in the garage. I don't recommend storing this indoors at all. I keep mine in this plastic garbage bag and in this box, and keep that in the garage because, like I said, it stinks. The second item about this is it's not as physically strong as the DX Engineering stuff. That premium antenna wire by DX Engineering is pretty strong, and it takes quite a bit of force to break it. This, not so much, so you got to be a little bit more careful with this stuff. However, Steve's research has shown that this is far less susceptible to having the issues that I had with my DX Engineering antenna wire melting when it's in contact with a tree branch. He says this stuff works really, really well. And so this is what he recommended, and this is what I'm using now, and I have not had an issue since I switched to this. The other adjustment I did with my EZ-L is I raised the horizontal section by about 10 or 15 feet. Now previously the antenna was with a, I'm trying to get my finger pointed correctly here, was right about in here in the upper left of your screen. Then it sloped downward to about here or so. What I ended up doing was getting a lineup in another one of my neighbor's trees, and I always ask your neighbor's permission before doing this, of course. And I was able to raise the horizontal section by about 10 or 15 feet. Maybe not a ton, but it probably helps me out a little bit, and it's standard amateur radio practice that you want to get your antennas as high as possible, and Steve even mentions that in the article. Try to get your vertical section up as high as possible and have that horizontal section up as high as possible. So a little bit of an improvement there. One other adjustment I made to my EZ-L is I added a second ground radial to it. I ran one along one of my neighbor's properties, and he was cool with that, and I told him I'd take it down in the spring, which of course I will. And Steve himself, NE0U, runs, I think, 6 ground radios, or 6 radios in total, and I think a couple of those, maybe 2 or 4 of them, might even be elevated. So don't be afraid to experiment with additional ground radios or elevated radios to your EZ-L. So that wraps up the changes I have done to my NE0U EZ-L 160 meter antenna. I can say it's worked quite well for me. Previously on 160 meters, using my 80 meter dipole, I had 15 DXEC. In just over a year and 2 months or so, I have now amassed 110 DXEC with 102 of those confirmed. So those results I'm quite happy with. So the antenna's done real well for me. Hopefully if you install the antenna, it works great for you too. If you're having problems finding the article, email me at my qrz.com address and I can send you a copy of it. With that said, thanks very much for watching, and 73 from Whiskey X-Ray 0 Victoria.